Hey guys, Dan here. I hope you are doing really well today. Thank you so much for connecting. Please do subscribe wherever you get this content. I'd love to keep in touch with you through this. And if you're able to, please do share on social media. I'd love to hear feedback as well. I want to share with you guys one of the statements that Jesus made as he was dying on the cross. And the cross was a brutal way to die, right? And being executed on the cross meant that there was multiple possible ways of dying, through dehydration, through asphyxiation, through blood loss, all of that kind of stuff, amongst many others. But let me read one of the statements that Jesus made in John chapter 19, verse 28 to 30. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. After being on the cross for about 6 hours, Jesus, in one of his final moments, he says, "I am thirsty." And in response to this, those that are around the cross that hear him say this, they don't get him any water, but what they do is they find a bucket of wine vinegar, of soured wine, and they get a sponge and they put it on a stick, and they soak the sponge in that soured wine, and they lift it up for Jesus to drink. That is not going to help his thirst. Actually, that's going to do the opposite. What an act of cruelty in these last moments. One final deed of rejection from the hardened hearts of mankind. Jesus is totally and finally rejected. Jesus would have been completely dehydrated. He probably would have had his last drink at the Last Supper the night before. Before he had the crown of thorns put on his head, before any of that, he would have been so thirsty. And yet, this was not just about physical thirst. This is about spiritual thirst. Every human being, we can experience, and probably have at times experienced, physical thirst. But every human being does experience spiritual thirst. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it's exposed in many of us, and exposed in me, how often I look to other things than God, than Jesus, than just the things that I should be looking to. So it's easier to zone out and watch Netflix rather than turn to the Bible. Why do we do that kind of stuff? Well, we're not finding our satisfaction in Him. We often look for in others or in other things for what we can only find in Jesus. And so our thirst is not quenched by what others can give us. That's kind of like the soured wine. But actually, it's only through what Jesus can give us. Jesus refers to this spiritual thirst throughout his earthly ministry. Let me read a few verses for you. John 7, verse 37 says, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink." John 4:14, "But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst." And John 2, we see that Jesus launches his ministry with his first miracle of turning water into wine. And at the cross we come full circle. Jesus finishes his earthly ministry by receiving soured wine. See, the wine that the world can give us is only the wine of death, the wine of sorrow, soured wine. But the wine that Jesus gives us, the satisfaction that Jesus gives us, is one full of joy, full of life. We need his wine of life. That is what we long for in our human experience, in our spiritual need. And in his final moments, Jesus resonates with the whole of humanity by saying, "I am thirsty." That's his declaration. He thirsted so that we wouldn't have to thirst again. He was rejected so that we would not have to be rejected. He died on that cross so that we could find life in Jesus for eternity. Wow. So just take a moment, reflect. What's an area that you've been looking for the wrong satisfaction in, that you've been looking for that's not been in Jesus? Maybe it's a relationship or financial security or approval from others. Or think back to when did you first recognize that you had a spiritual thirst? Maybe you've never been at that point. Maybe you need to think about that a little bit more. Actually, maybe Jesus is the answer. So thank you so much for connecting, and hopefully see you soon.